Welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the Let's Gup Shup edition. So this is a space where we are going to gather to have real, lighthearted, but meaningful conversations. And I'm your host, Kiran Randhawa. Today's episode touches on something personal to me, the white girl complex, and how it shaped my sense of identity growing up between two cultures. So we're going to call today's very first Let's Gup Shup Navigating the White Girl Complex. And for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, Gup Shup in my language, in Punjabi, means getting together with friends, loved ones, people that we like to be around, and have real honest conversations, gossip with someone, talk about the proud fist bumping moments you've had, but also be genuine and share some vulnerable moments, maybe some struggles you're having in your relationships. I always remembered my parents having these gup shups with their friends and shooting the shit and having these really cool conversations. So these next few segments are going to be dedicated to that kind of a style of gup shup. So because today's episode is getting closer to our 100th episode, I just thought, if there's one thing I've learned throughout this journey, I've been thinking a lot about this lead up to 100. Through all of these 90 somewhat episodes, I've learned that it's really about the curiosity that opens doors and invites us to having meaningful connections. The more open I am and more willing I am to look for my blind spots, to work on myself, the more amazing people I meet, the more great hard conversations I have, and the more learning and gratitude that I find myself with. So thinking back to our very first episode where I shared my experiences about racial identity, two moments still stand out to me today. And when I started this journey, I talked about how this was going to be a learning journey for me. I didn't know where it was going to take me, but I definitely keep going back to the very first episode. And so for the first thing that stands out still is the younger generation, our South Asian kids, and the attitude, the sense of, we just get treated this way. This is how it is. If we speak up when we have racial experiences, then we'll have less places to be. That still bothers me because I'm raising biracial children right now. And I think we have to continue working on that. We just can't accept that's the way it is. The second thing that still stands out is a personal moment. And I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it because trust me, I've tried. It's when my sister and I went to complain to the white manager, about how we were denied service because of the color of our skin. And yes, that is what we were told. I pulled my phone out to prove to this white manager that I was different, a different kind of brown girl. That's been a reoccurring theme in many of my relationships with my white friends, where I've had to be different to fit in. So I just want to say I'm not blaming anyone. But it's something that I'm reflecting on a lot. And this need to be seen as different has been creating tension within me. And I think that's where the magic of Gup Shup comes in. If we have these conversations the way they're meant to be, real, lighthearted, we're taking our own responsibility, we're open to learning, then maybe we can approach these complex topics through a collective lens together, not personalizing and taking things on an individual basis. So for me, it's about asking questions, being curious, as I say, and understanding where some of these feelings have been coming from of the late and coming together as a community. So here's the thing, and I'm still talking, and so you're going to have to get used to it because I have a lot more to say right now. So here's the thing. At the time, I didn't fully understand the impact of this need to be accepted growing up and when I had this white girl complex. This word comes up a lot in the next little bit, this word acceptance. I was chasing after a feeling of fitting in. And looking back, it's kind of funny, but also sad. I spent so much time trying to blend into this Western white girl mold by ironing my hair. This is before straighteners came out, lightening my skin, removing body hair, and then even changing how I pronounce my name. These little things seemed minor at the time, but they've added up to something bigger. It's this internal struggle with identity that has stayed with me, but I'm only just discovering it now. So today I want to unpack how these little actions, fit in within the Western white girl mold, how they've affected me. And I really want to open the door to more conversations like this for us people of color, us South Asians that are living the coconut, Oreo life, thinking you have to be one way, okay with it, saying just get it, just deal with it. It's not about being against each other. It's just like, how do we come together and make sense of some of the things that actually are on our mind and are impacting us? So as we talk about today's segment, exploring the white girl complex, just bear with me because I have a couple more things I want to say. And this is really because I want to put context in for everyone. And I just want to say, I've really struggled to talk about this white girl complex content that I've been making videos with. And so naturally, it makes sense that I'm doing a lot of explaining because I feel guilty, because I don't want to offend anyone and upset anyone when I talk about these things that have impacted me. I've found myself struggling with this whole complex. So as I've said, growing up, there was this pressure to assimilate into Western culture. Like we said, to dress, act, speak in ways that made us feel more white and less South Asian. And this inner tension I've mentioned, it's about who's I supposed to be? Should I embrace my cultural roots, tone them down to fit in with my surroundings? I've spent a lot of time feeling like I've had to choose one or the other. In this part of my life, I'm trying to find the ands versus the ors. So, this whole ironing my hair so that my hair would look more like the white girls. All of us brown girls did this. I know we used to iron each other's hair. The lightening our skin with Jolene or whatever is called bleach. It was to light our facial hair, but also we all secretly hoped that it would lighten our skin color as well. I know it did for me. All these Western beauty standards that I grew up chasing just made me have a bigger, I think, hole in my whole self-esteem area of what am I supposed to look like? Who should I look like? Because no one ever looked like me on TV or around me. And I think a lot of us agree. We know that feeling. Then there's my name. My name is Kiran. My name is actually Kiran Deep Kaur Randhawa, but it's become a point of contention. I have never pronounced it that way. I have always pronounced it the Western way. And many of you have made Western names to make life easier for the community, our jobs, our schools. It's embarrassing to have your name butchered, mispronounced, inappropriately said, but it's our name. It's where we come from. So I'm realizing I'm quite impacted. I was not expecting to get emotional, but I'm just realizing I'm really impacted by the fact that I have a beautiful story behind where my name came from. And I think a lot of us do. But again, we don't go there. We don't share it. We don't talk about it. And if that's supposed to be the beginning of our story, isn't it so silly that we're not even starting there? We're starting somewhere completely different. And so I want to find my way back to saying my name in the way that it's meant to be said and not in the Western way. And so here's the thing again, being impacted by all this stuff. We chase after these feelings of acceptance and not realizing the cost. And so when we say we're okay and we're fine, and why are people always complaining and having identity issues, I think a lot of us and a lot of you listening can relate that it's in there. It's in there deep. We just don't recognize the way it's coming out. And one of the biggest ways I'm noticing it's coming out is impacting our self-esteem, our sense of belonging, worthiness. I think we question a lot of times in a room, should we be here? Should we not? And all of that comes from somewhere, you guys. And I'm finding it's coming for me from those gaps of the Western and Eastern worlds. So here we are now. Now we're at a place where today's segment is diving into some of these things, and the ones coming up in the next little while, we'll talk more about some of these things I brought up. Today, I'm bringing a guest back that was on just actually the last episode. She was not even a week ago, and she's already back in the room recording with me. And you guys all remember Urmi Hussain. I introduced her as the Bengali by blood. She was born in Italy. She lives in Canada, and she's got a great book out. It's Discovering Your Identity. She talks a lot about the brown girl sort of guilt, the brown girl world of figuring our life. And she shares a lot about how can we uplift and how can we empower each other, because we've in many ways been pitted against each other and don't always realize that. So I'm so glad because I'm so nervous to do this today, but I'm so glad that I get to have Urmi in the room to support me and work through some of this white girl complex and, sharing today's MFU segment. Because if you listen to the last one, we saved our middle fingers up for a special episode because we both agreed we had a lot to say. So thank you for being so patient and letting me talk for 10 minutes, Urmi. Oh my goodness. Welcome back. How are you?
I'm good. I was becoming emotional too as I was listening to you. I was like, oh, that's so nice. It was so nice.
Aw, I didn't want to look at you when I was recording because I was like, I can't make eye contact, but I could feel your energy. And it was definitely, I think, very comforting and warming. And I think that's also why I got emotional because I felt very supported in the conversation. And, we don't have answers today. I know you have a book. I know you have a lot of your experience. I have life experience. Today isn't about giving answers about what people need to do. Today's just really about Gup Shup. So it's talking, it's getting things off our chest. And so we didn't get to do our middle fingers up. So today we will. But maybe before we do all that, I said a lot of things and I just thought I'd ask you, is there anything that came to your mind or anything you want to ask or add or say based on what I have just said?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
And it's more about how do you feel right now that you said all those things out loud? Do you feel much better?
Oh, wow. You're like a therapist. What a good question. What an important question. I feel tingly. Like I just feel a little, I feel alive. Like I'm glad I have you in the room. I'm glad I'm doing this. I've really been encouraged by some listeners, some loved ones. They know who they are, who've been pushing me to talk a lot more about these things. And I think it's because people are also thinking about them. So I just think, I feel like people are very kind and will receive what I'm saying in a kind way. And that makes me feel a sense of relief, if that makes sense. We have to be able to get this stuff off our chest and talk about these things. And they're happening every day, like this whole, white girl complex. And part of it is this racism that, not only experiencing out in the world, but experiencing it in my own friendship groups, friends that I no longer talk to, friends that openly are saying things to me like, what is racism? There is no racism. Why are you making a big deal? You're lucky you grew up here. And that's not for all of these people to say. And I'm learning that, that's not theirs to say. And so as I'm working through some of this stuff and learning it, I realize I'm not the only one. I know there's a lot more of us out there, especially those of us that are in interracial relationships. I feel there's a correlation. Those of us that have found ourselves with white people or in particular, maybe, I think there's a connection there with some of our identity stuff. And at some point it catches up and we have to figure it out. And that's what I'm doing right now. You know what I mean? So yeah, anything else stand out for you? Like, you growing up in Italy mostly, and you've come to Canada as an adult, but growing up, like some of the things that I mentioned, do you relate to that? Was that a little bit like the culture there for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to add is that it takes a lot of courage to say what you said. And the fact that you're able to do it is very admirable because I feel in a sense that I'm not able to share everything all the time because I have a sense of guilt.
Yeah.
But I feel a lot of the things that you said, not feeling like we're enough or feeling like, when you said about straightening your hair,
yeah,
like every brown girl did it. I did it too. Like I also used to straighten my hair. I used to put contact lenses because I didn't like the color of my eyes.
Yes. You know what? My mother just never let me, but if she did, I would have been there too, because I remember I was 14 when I got contacts. And oh man, back then the blue and gray and green had just come out and all the kids would do it. And yeah, exactly, because that was always what I wanted, was the blonde hair, the blue eyes. And if you didn't have it, then you didn't feel, well, at least I can say I didn't feel like I was good enough. And, it's interesting. It's interesting that we've made to feel that way all these years, and how that affects you as you get older, right? Like you're like, some things you're like, okay, that's silly. But when we really think about like, why at that age is that the thing that I needed the most, right? Because we wanted acceptance. We wanted to belong.
Exactly. And here's the thing, because I did some of the things that you said when I was a teenager. So I used to like straighten my hair because I didn't like my curly, wavy hair that are typically Bengali hair. I did like a side bangs, and it was not typical of like Bengali girls back then. I cut it myself, and I used to put blue contact lenses and green contact lenses because I did not like the color of my eyes. And I would see like all of my friends having like blue eyes, the green eyes, and I always like feel jealous. I was like, I have this boring black eyes.
Yeah.
And I did that for many, 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 many years. Many years. And I remember the other thing was I never wanted to walk in the sun because I didn't want to have dark skin.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, the dark skin stuff. I have so many stories. Like I've talked about this before too, but I'm just naturally the darker one out of my siblings. And a lot of my cousins too. I'm one of the darker ones. And in our culture, and this is going back to colonization in the way that, you know, in India, at least I can speak for us Punjabi people, like this is how we've been taught. We've been taught so much of this that we believe this, and this is the way we think it is. The lighter you are, the better you are. And there's lots of reasons why, but I'll leave it at that. And for me, that was always communicated to me in different ways that I'm not good enough. So not only now am I struggling to blend in with the white girls, but then even in the Punjabi community, I'm still too dark. And so I think that is also how these complexes happen, because your culture has to compare to the Western world, but you know, our families are just, they're just learning too. They're trying to figure this out. So my parents weren't ahead. They didn't understand some of these things in the way maybe hopefully I can with my kids. But there's a lot of that where you're like, I don't belong here and I don't belong over there. So then where is the best place? So then you start cutting corners and like making your own culture. Like, I'll take this part and then I'll take that part of, right? And does that, you're nodding your head, so it sounds like that's something that you're relating to as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but especially about the skin color part, like I remember hearing it at home, saying, "Oh yeah, she's very like white, she's so pretty," and then they would always make a comment when someone was like dark or too black, and they were like, "Yeah, but he's black, he's not good looking." And I grew up thinking that, like I grew up that being beautiful is equal to being white.
Yes.
And I remember there was another thing that when people would get married, they would always choose someone based on their skin color. They would always say things like, "Oh yeah, he's a good-looking guy. He's he's not
fair.
dark.
He's fair skin.
He's fair skin."
Yeah.
And I also remember this. Like even when I went back to Bangladesh, I remember people wanting to buy this particular brand called Fair and Lovely. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I don't know if they have it.
Sorry, say it again. What's it called?
Fair and Lovely.
Oh, Fair and Lovely. Maybe that's the name of our episode today.
And people would buy it because they want it to be white. Like they would see white as like the superior ethnicity, but then it was also wrong that you felt you were too white. You know what I mean? Like you want to be like that, but then it's not good that you look like that.
Totally.
So that was the struggle I grew up with.
You know, and I relate to that because I think on the flip side in the Western world, because like, you know, how we're saying, like we really were taught if you didn't look white, then you definitely weren't going to be accepted, as we're both saying. And one of the ways that always happened was if I was in a setting with white people, they would make comments about how I'm so exotic, or I'm the most prettiest brown girl in the room. Or the most prettiest brown girl. And it wasn't, and you know, and I used to take that as a compliment. I'd be like, "Oh my God, I'm so special. Thank you. And then, you know, as you get older and you know, a little while ago, as we've been doing a lot of unraveling and looking at some of these things, I was talking to my husband. I'm like, how often do you guys in the Western culture ever say she's the most prettiest white girl? It's just she's the hottest girl. Like she's so hot. No, there's no comparison. But again, those ways that we word these things, they make a big impact. And in the moment, maybe we don't realize it. But this is where that invitation for us to think about how we talk and how we learn to talk. Where is that influence coming from, right? And for a lot of people in the white community, it was like, you're not used to seeing someone that looks a different nationality. So automatically you're different, all these sorts of things. And I think fair, you can think all those things. But again, it's really is a hard thing to sit in a room and to be treated like you're different and you don't feel special. You feel like people are staring at the pimple on your face.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I had. like not, it wasn't an issue, but when I went to high school, all of my friends were white Italian friends. Like I did not have any like brown friends. There were no brown friends, and I was the only one who had a different skin color, and they would always make this comment, "Oh, you don't need to go to the beach because you're already tan. You are already tan all year long." So this was in the school setting, and then when I was at home, I had the other comment, which was, "Oh, good thing that you are like you have fair skin. You know, you don't have that issue of being too dark." And so it, like now that I'm much older, I understand much better what these messages were, and I feel like everything was wrong to begin with. Like I don't understand why we always have to make a comment about some skin color. Why does it matter so much? And I think it goes back a little bit like it's a colonization, you know, like if you were white, you were considered the superior race, you were considered rich and all these things. But now when I think about it, I'm like, why did I watch Bollywood movies and I saw Bollywood actresses endorsing those brands about, you know, becoming fair? Like I felt like it was wrong for them to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and now that I watch TV, I see that there is a little bit more diversity, you know, even in the like in the shows you see, like even in Bridgerton, you see that girl, I forgot her name now.
Oh, yes.
Ashley, I don't know what her
Simone
name is.
Ashley.
Yeah, her.
Yeah,
And I'm
beautiful.
like, thank God we have
Yes.
someone who has darker skin, and I'm happy that she's there because you know dark is also beautiful. Any kind of color is beautiful, but it's just that the way we grew up, they made you feel that no matter what color you were, there's something wrong with it. You know, they always
100%.
made you feel different.
They did. And I think we went along with it too. Then we think, okay, we are too. And it's so interesting because, you know, I was talking to my husband about this too. I'm like, you know, the racial comments that I will get from our friends and even our white family, they're like microaggressions. So they don't necessarily realize they're being racist because they're not. Their intention isn't. And that's sometimes what stops the conversation. So sometimes I'll hear these weird comments like, oh, you know, how come you don't have an accent? Or how come you're much darker? Or, you know, so it's always our facial, external sort of representations, right? That's sort of how a lot of people will interact with us. And sometimes I think the issue is like, you're asking me stuff that I don't have control over. You're not asking me about, you know, the choices I've made in life or what I do as a person or as my character or what. But you're addressing this like I have zero control over the fact that my skin is this color, but yet this seems to be like it's my problem. Like you're telling me and the way you're talking to me is like it's my problem. And I think I now see how many times my white friends have been that way with me in conversation and I never picked up on it before. But I felt something weird. And now when I look back and look at those conversations with a magnifying glass, I'm like, oh my gosh, so many times that is what led me to feel like, oh, I'm different, or I'm lucky that I get to be friends with this group of white people, right?
Yeah.
And even at the office, oh, I'm so different because I'm cool. And really what I always thought cool was being Western. And to be honest, my sister-in-law pointed it out to my sister and I a few years ago because she's like, you guys talk about being cool as if like you're white or you're Western. And, you know, you have to be a cool brown girl by being Western. And my sister and I realized, oh my gosh, we do that. We also think we're different because we want to be that way, which makes us, you know, great. And so it's like undoing a lot of that in our own head. It's just, you know, when you're constantly, it's ingrained in your brain, and it doesn't mean you can't undo it, but it just means we need more of us to like speak up in moments. I think when we're faced with certain white people in conversations about, okay, this is not the way to ask this, or, you know, it's sometimes I feel like it's not my job to tell them. And anytime I have brought it up to my white friends, they're not my friends anymore. They've chosen to not be my friends anymore. So what do you do? Like how do we navigate wanting to speak up more, but then you're also like told, stop talking?
Yeah. Honestly, it's hard. Honestly, it's hard because I think it's also an education, educating the other side of the spectrum, you know, like I also feel like, especially for me, for a lot of my friends, it was also an opportunity to learn because it was their first time meeting someone that was different from them. And I had this situation with my long hair because I used to have really long hair. And my parents, my mom especially, she would always tell me, like, don't cut your hair, don't cut your hair. And she would always complain every time I would cut my hair because she would always compare me to my Italian friends and be like, oh, you want to be like them by cutting your hair, you want to have short hair. And then even with my Italian friends, I would always hear the same comments too. They would tell me, oh, you have like really long hair, why don't you cut them? And it was like a big deal having long hair back in the days. And I remember I always had this urge of cutting my hair and having like stylish hair like all of my friends would do. Like, I would never go to the hairdresser. Let me tell you this, I would never go to the hairdresser. Like, I would have all of my high school friends going to the hairdresser, getting their hair done. I would never do it. So my mom would not let me. She was like, no, it's wrong. They would cut all your hair. And she probably was wrong every time I would cut my hair. And now what happened is, now I do cut my hair, but every time I see my mom, she always make that comment. She's like, why did you cut your hair? Now you basically like have no hair, even though like my hair are long. But it was a big deal, the hair thing. It was such a big deal.
It is. There's so much about hair. Like, one is, it's valued in our culture, some of like in the Punjabi culture, in the religion aspect as well. And so there's all these different components about our hair where, we're also told this is how you look feminine and all these sorts of things. Right. But also then it's always interesting too, because on one hand with the hair, like, having to iron and make my hair be straight, like the way the girls here are. But then at the same time, you get women touching your hair weird or saying things in a weird way, like, oh, look at your hair's interesting. I have talked about this a few times about a lot of women of color, particularly Black women, get this often of the obsession with the hair. And I think I'm trying to figure it out as I'm going along. I don't know if anything like that stands out for you.
Yeah, mine was, here's the thing, like when I was with my Italian friends, I was wanting to be like them. And then when I was, let's say, in the Bengali community, I would hear a lot of comments being like, oh, you're too whitewashed.
Yeah.
And I would get really, really offended because I was not quite sure what it meant. And I was like, I don't know what it really means. What does it mean to be whitewashed? And it bothered me. And it still bothers me when I hear that. Because I'm thinking, here we are living in a Western world. You're not staying at home all day. You're not in a bubble. You are expected to integrate into society. So I don't think anything wrong if you start to, assimilate yourself with the Western society, but it doesn't mean I'm leaving my roots. I often hear this type of comments from Bengali people saying, oh, you're too whitewashed. You think like a white person. You think like a Western person. And it bothered me so much. And I'm thinking, why are you here in the first place? Why are you here? And I hear this a lot even with people that were born in the Western society, people that grew up in the Western society, making this kind of comments really makes me really mad. Yeah. I really does. Because I'm thinking, I'm not leaving anything. I'm just bringing another perspective. And I don't think it's wrong if you think like a Western people. I think once I made this comment. I made this comment to a friend who is brown. And I said, oh, why don't you go and live with your girlfriend before getting married? Because they were already spending their weekends together. And I suggested, just go and live together and see how it goes. And then he just gave me this weirdest look ever. And he was like, are you white? This is what he told me. But I'm thinking, but you're already spending the weekends with her. So how does it change anything?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're making a really good point as you're sharing this about, your own community talking about, oh, you've turned on us, you're whitewash. I think this is that whole, when our own culture, we're pitted against each other. And this is also like why we're doing Gup Shup is how do we talk about these things and help our own people of color understand that our own stories and experiences aren't going to be all the same. And we all have to accept, like, some of us were born in that country. Some of us immigrated very young. Some of us immigrated older. And then, our financial status is going to impact us different, how we immigrated. All of these sorts of things make a big deal. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in going against each other and we compare. And, it's actually leading up to now I think about what your big middle fingers up was going to be. We should talk about that, right? Yeah, let's actually go there. This is a good way to go there. Yeah. Because we didn't do our middle fingers up when we recorded last time. So there you go. I segued it for you. What is your middle fingers to?
Mine is the typical brown sentence that you hear from every brown person is, "What will people say?"
Mm-hmm.
I hate the statement. I don't like to use the word hate, but in this case, I actually do. I feel like this is the right moment to use it. I do hate hearing this statement. I grew up hearing it. I still hear it, and I still do not understand why do we care so much about people's opinion. Like, why do we care about what they say? Why do you care about their judgment? You know what? At the end of the day, people will judge us no matter what. You want to give them something to talk about? Let's give them something to talk about. But whether it's good or bad, people will always have something to say. And that's because I feel like brown people like to get into other people's business.
Before getting into our own, right? We get into other people's before, yeah.
Exactly. Like, let's say life decisions. I don't know. You decide to get married at a certain age and people make comments saying, "Oh, but you're too old. What will people say?" You want to get on a different career path. I don't know. You want to become you want to become an artist instead of an engineer. And people will say, "Yeah, but it's not what will people say if they find out that you become an artist?" Let's say there is a wedding and you decide not to go, then people will be like, "Oh, what will people say? They will think that we're not like a united family." Like, every single thing always leads up to that, like, what will people say? I still hear it. And I always, like, especially from my parents, I hear it from my parents, and I always tell them, "Why do you care so much? Why do you care about what will people say? Why do you care so much why do you care that it will ruin your reputation? Like, it won't affect your reputation." And recently, I actually rewatched the movie Kabikoshi Kabigam. I don't know if you ever watched it.
Yes.
So,
but it's been a long time.
Here's the thing. I watched it, I think, 3-4 times. And every time I watch it, I learn something new. And every time I watch it, I feel like there's something that I don't think it's okay with it. Like, in the movie, you have Amitabh playing the role of the father, and then he basically tells his son, I don't know what was his name, Blackwood or something. He tells him that, don't do anything that will ruin my reputation. But then he got married to this girl, like, from a different social class. Like, when I watch that particular scene, it makes me really think about the pressure that we get from our family members. Like, we always have to live up to their standards. We always have to live up to their reputation, because anything wrong that we do, it's just going to fall on us. We're just going to ruin or taint the reputation of our family members. And it's so much pressure. And we keep hearing it, "Oh, what will people say? What will people say?" And now, like, for me, it's something that I try to care less and less and less, especially because I'm in my 30s. I'm thinking, you know what? It doesn't matter. I really don't care about what people say. But it is something that I constantly hear. Yeah.
Well, you're right. Like, we were raised with it. Our family was. I honestly feel like, and this is me being wild and maybe no one will agree, but when I think a lot about that, I feel like a lot of that question comes from colonization. Like, there was this need to assimilate, need to follow orders, and you have fear, and you do as an obedient person would. And when I hear that phrase back all the time from our elders, our family, all of us, I don't know, lately more and more I keep thinking that's how I make sense of where it came from, is we're meant to follow orders. And as our generations now, we're 400 years later, we're changing. We're learning that our decisions can come from our own self. And that's really hard for our elders to adapt to. But you know what? There's hope, because there's elders out there. I know my parents are some of those elders who are really wanting to learn and make a change and grow with their adult children as well. And like, maybe that's something we can ask from our elders. It's like, how can we get your help in helping us have these conversations and being okay with figuring out, like, maybe our issues are different than their issues. They're not the same. And yet, our generations have to figure out these sorts of things in our way too. And I agree with you, like, living with what will people say is definitely not how I'm raising my children. That's for sure. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like, of course I care about the community, and of course we care about being good citizens and being kind. You know, I don't want to have a bad reputation. I agree, but it's also up to me to create it. Other people and what they say is not going to build my reputation. My reputation comes from my own actions. And I think our elders and our people have to learn that, because they care about what people will say, but how many addictions, how much domestic violence, how many, you know, relationship issues, abuse issues does our community face? And yet we care so much about what people say, but why don't we care about the right things, which is how do we heal, man? Let's care about that.
Yeah, but you know what? I understand your point of view, but I also think it depends on where we are. Because again, It goes back to, you know, like Canada is different. I feel like people are a little bit more progressing. I'd say, like,
I remember you saying that. My mom agreed with you too, by the way. She really liked you on the episode. And she's like, you said it really well. She's like, I agree with that. We have our own community, depending on where in the world we are healing in a different way.
That's my point. I feel like in Canada, people are more open to things. But again, if you go back to, I don't know, let's say you go to UK, this is where my parents live. There is no way you can change the mindset. Yeah. There's literally no way. No way. And I've seen it. I see it all the time. I go back there. I've seen real life experiences as well. Like things like going back to what people say. There was a girl like in her 30s, and then what happened is basically her parents were pressuring her to get married, and they were ready to give her married to like anyone, literally anyone. It doesn't matter what he was doing, anyone, because they were just so worried that that people would think that there was something wrong with her. Like they did not care that, you know, maybe she was not going to be happy. They didn't care if there was any type of issues with domestic violence. So no one ever thinks about those things. Yeah. Some people are really stuck in that kind of mindset.
Totally.
They're really, really stuck. And again, I think the problem goes back to the fact that, especially in UK, people don't like to integrate with the British people.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense too. I understand that history, and I hear what you're saying. There's a lot more sides to why we are the way we are, right? And I think going back to the beginning of our conversation, as I'm, you know, working through my own identity and, you know, just even the white girl complex, and we've talked a bit about where this is coming from, I think we really have to focus on like, how can we learn about our own stuff and understanding like where our own story comes from? Because like you said, your home may be a bit different than my home and my friend's home and whatnot. But is there a way, like, can we still challenge anyone and everyone listening from our community to think about some of these things we talked about today? Like, these are not wild feelings and experiences. So many of us share them. And at least if we can build a community where we're talking more about how these experiences have shaped us and like also affected our relationships, some of the, right? Like not in the greatest way. So if we can start to openly go there, just imagine the healing we're doing for the next generation and the next generation and the next, right? Like maybe the older generation, we don't want to forget them. We love them. They hold a lot of our history, but maybe you're right. Like that's not where we want to focus. We want to focus on the next generation. And okay, can we look at what will people say in a different way? What do you think about that?
Yeah, we have to learn to unlearn in order to heal. And I do think that the change starts with us, like me and you being aware of this, not with the past generation. I as much as we want to change that, I don't think there is much that we can do about it, but we can bring forward the change, like going forward, you know, like I think the next generations will be better. I really see that it's much better, you know, like I see with the people around me. I feel like we're the one in the middle who have to fix it, basically.
Yeah. That's right. And it's funny because it's like we're the bridge between the East and the West, right? So we're building bridges. That's what we do. Thank you today for coming and chatting with me. I'm glad that we did part 2 separate because I really wanted to take the time to talk about some of this stuff on my mind. And, you know, you've really encouraged me today sitting and talking about, okay, like we're going to do more of these Gup Shups and talking about these identity things. before we go, maybe one thing you can leave our listeners with today, something that we can think about for ourselves, those of us that are experiencing the East and West gaps, and maybe even for our friends that didn't grow up in the same way, but, how can we all work together? So it's something you can leave for everyone today?
I feel like it's always such a tough question, but one thing, especially when it comes to identity and, closing the gap between the East and the West, I would say to everyone is that when you don't have a seat at the table, you have to create that seat.
Yes.
And that would be my message for everyone. Like when you feel like you're not fitting anywhere, it's just know that you fit every single boxes and it's up to you to be there. Like, it's okay. Like, you should not start thinking, oh, I don't think I should be here. No, you're meant to be there. So don't start second guessing about things. So that would be my message.
I love that. And you know what? I'm going to leave something too, because a big part of today was talking about the struggle I have with my name and saying my name and all these little things that have built me to a place where I still say Kiran, and how can I start to get there? And so when I think about that, I know for me, and maybe for anyone else listening, this could be for you, but I think it's really important, I know for myself, that I start finding, and I have been working on this, the balance between like cultural authenticity. We talk about being authentic a lot. I think we use that word all the time. We want to be authentic. But I don't know if we all know what it means to be that way, because it means we have to dig deep. We have to learn about ourselves. We have to face some maybe hard conversations. I don't know. I'm doing all those things because I'm really trying to figure out like what is being authentic. And fitting in can be challenging, especially when your name carries so much of your identity and heritage. And I'm just thinking about all of you out there that have had to change your name to Bob or Amy or something like that because, no one could pronounce it. So for me, my advice to our young community, our South Asian, women, our community is it's time for us to start embracing the power of our names. Our name is a core part of who we are. And I think it's a representation of our culture, our family, and our roots. And, invite all of us, or maybe you guys can help me say my name in the real way. So thank you. Thank you for trying this experiment with me, Urmi. I don't know if you have any last words before we conclude, but I really appreciated this time with you.
I enjoyed it so much, and I enjoyed the first part a lot. Like listening to you was really nice, honestly. It was really nice, and I want you to continue doing this.
Oh, that means a lot. Maybe you'll come back again. Yeah, third time.
Third time the charm.
Yeah.